Up, guys? Miss me? Yeah, so I know that I've been gone for a long time yet again, and just like I've said before, I'm not going to over-explain myself for why I've been gone for, yeesh, that long? It's just life stuff, but I'm back once again to talk about something that I didn't think I'd be talking about again in the same year. For those of you who don't know, I uploaded a video about this topic earlier in the year, and I was thinking that would be the end of it, with possibly an upload about the KOTOR games. But now, I'm here with part 2. Mainly because I feel like the Star Wars brand has been in a very rough patch recently, and I just feel like I need to have a bit of escapism to a time when Star Wars was peak instead of weak. So join me this time as I talk about some Star Wars games that might be good, but could also be bad? Who knows, let's get started. Up first is yet again another direct movie adaptation. I know it may seem like a waste of a spot, but LEGO and Super Star Wars I feel are pretty important in the Star Wars gaming scene, so it just felt right. Unlike LEGO, Super Star Wars actually had 3 separate releases which chronicled the original trilogy. Each of them are practically identical though, with the exception of the levels of course, which are obviously tailor-made for their respective films. Anyways, the first game begins, wouldn't you know it, just as episode 4 does. The droids land on Tatooine with the plans, but unlike the film, Luke doesn't purchase his dad's droid back. Instead, he finds him after killing a Sarlacc, which that was a special edition change. R2 is also in a completely different spot. The Jawas didn't even bother selling him. He's being guarded in the Sandcrawler by this wild f***ing creature who lives in the lava. Should I repeat myself? After that, it follows more faithful beats. We meet Ben, get the saber, go to Mos Eisley, meet Han and Chewie, board the Death Star, yada yada yada. Let me get to the gameplay now, because I mainly find this game immensely frustrating. First off, controls. The Super Nintendo only had 8 directions to work with, and sure, it's never usually a problem for games on the console, but with this game, it could lead to very annoying situations. There will be times when you need to make a high jump or shoot a specific direction to hit your target, and it just won't work. As I'm showing on screen, I'm trying to hit this simple little trap right here in the Sandcrawler level, but the aiming just sucks big time here. Speaking of the Sandcrawler, the outside can be a pain too since it involves vertical platforming. Let me just say straight up, it wasn't fun. I should also mention, dying when you have so many upgrades is a huge no, especially during a boss. For example, Plasma is the high upgrade for your blaster, and dying sets you back all the way to your beginner blaster. So if you die during a hard boss fight, you may as well just quit. One last note about this game though is the character roster. You can pick between Luke, Han, and Chewie once you get to Mos Eisley, and it's pretty interesting to see these outdated information. Han wasn't established as a Corellian yet, and Kashyyyk is spelt with a Z. Overall, the first game was a little whack, but let's take a crack at Super Empire Strikes Back. Holy shit, that actually all rhymed. One thing that's immediately apparent is the controls have been refined. Luke's double jump now works how you'd expect it to, just double tap A. You also start with both a blaster and lightsaber this time around. The Hoth levels aren't really that fun, but this probe droid boss is actually kind of wild. Reminds me of a Sonic boss fight. Echo Base has this little shoot 'em up section at the end, and the Battle of Hoth level, while ambitious for the system, is kind of disorienting. Anyways, there's not much to add with this one, you know, slight improvements with similar level structure. Let's see if the last Super Star Wars game has much left to offer though. Firstly, it starts a little weird because we begin in a vehicle section. It's not too bad though, and soon enough we're thrown into the true first level. We actually get to pick 3 characters right out of the gate, but I went with Luke again since he's the most interesting. One new move that was added is saber throwing. I'd like to discuss this level more, aside from this purple praying mantis, but since there's no sense of direction with this level, I kept getting confused on where exactly to venture to. On top of that, you have to do vertical platforming, which I absolutely loathe, at least in this game series. And after getting a game over, I was just kinda over this game already. I know that makes me come off as a quitter and not giving it a chance, but since these games are all very similar, I just feel like if you played one, you've played the rest. This trilogy overall isn't bad, I just think more so it isn't for me. It definitely has an arcade game vibe with the life system and high scores. I think by the 3rd game, the controls are much better and it could have been a fun series, but it just has so many frustrating elements. Platforming, respawning enemies, dying takes away all upgrades, including health, and so on. Overall, I'd say give one of them a shot, depending on your favorite original trilogy movie, because playing all 3 isn't very necessary, honestly. Also, be prepared for some grade A bullshit with how the enemies work. If you can find an infinite life code, that would probably help immensely with beating at least one of these games. Second, but technically fourth, game up is Shadows of the Empire, released in 1996. Initially, this was supposed to be featured in the first part, but due to my thoughts on it that you'll see soon, I decided to push it ahead to this video. Strangely enough, Shadows of the Empire had a peculiar development cycle, so I want to briefly go over it. The game was actually supposed to launch with the Nintendo 64 in North America. It was even advertised as such during E3 1996, but due to poor reactions from attendees, it was delayed to December 1996. Behind the scenes, it was already a rocky start, with the scale of the game being downsized from the envisioned 19 levels to 10. Interestingly, Miyamoto even helped a bit with this game, where he basically gave the team suggestions like how the lead character should be animated. Speaking of which, we should probably jump into the actual game now. So, in Shadows of the Empire, you control Dash Rendar, an old acquaintance of Han Solo, and he's actually kind of identical to him in a few ways. Because of that, he was actually brought back into the Disney canon with the sole purpose of pointing out how similar Han and him are. Our first level is the Battle of Hoth, yet again, where Act 1 has us piloting a snowspeeder where we shoot down some probe droids, AT-STs, and AT-ATs. For the time, this was an impressive recreation of the battle from the movie, like more so than the last game we covered. The controls aren't too dated either, so first impressions aren't too shabby. Act 2 has us controlling Dash from outside the vehicle where we are tasked with repowering the generator. I talked about the flight controls, now what about the infantry controls? This is an N64 game we're talking about. While the snowspeeder controls were alright, Rendar is a bit more clunky. Like the classic Resident Evil games, he kinda has tank controls, so to speak. And on a level that is an ice planet, you are bound to slip and fall and lose a life. Which I did exactly that in the footage right here. What I dislike most about controlling Dash isn't to do with him, it's the camera. It gets stuck at weird angles where I can barely see what's happening. You thought Mario 64 had a bad camera? Think again. Anyways, Dash eventually gets back to the ship in Act 3, not before facing an AT-ST, which is a little annoying before you find out running circles around it allows you to evade every attack it has. Act 4, which is the final act for level 1, has us piloting the Outrider through an asteroid field while shooting down TIE fighters / bombers. Honestly, that's all there is to say about this one. Level 2 brings us to the Ord Mantell Junkyard, which consists of us platforming on these hover trains while being shot at by enemies that fly.
They fly now?
That is a big gripe I have with the combat. Enemies in the sky are annoying to kill. Dash takes so long to auto-aim up there, plus the free camera is too sensitive, so that's out the window. Not to mention, the platforming across hover trains can be simple, but then other times can be agonizing. And it all has to do with the physics, which is probably my biggest critique of the game. As you can see in the footage, many times I attempt to simply turn a corner or back up a little bit, but Dash just goes straight off the edge. Anyways, let's wrap this level up. At the end of the level, you face off against IG-88, where at first he's tricky to understand, but like the AT-ST, spamming him with Seekers just drains his health. Okay, level 3, Gal Spaceport, where the most notable thing about the first half is gaining a jetpack. And at the end of the level, we face off against the bounty hunter Boba Fett. He's honestly not too hard. Again, spamming Seekers does the trick. It's when he gets into the Slave 1 is the moment I have problems. The turrets lock onto you no matter where you are, and they drain your health fast. By the time this phase started, most of the power-ups were already gone because I picked them up when fighting Boba Fett. Yeah, that could be on me for wasting them, but sorry if I was under the impression the boss fight was over after I beat Boba Fett. Plus, I had no more lives left, meaning I would have to start the entire level all over again. I'd already been playing for 30 minutes, and the level overall was really dull and boring, so yeah, no way am I continuing. Overall, Shadows of the Empire had a solid beginning that quickly plummeted in the following levels. And I heard good things from people who have played this. So either they have rose-tinted glasses, or they have some interesting taste. At the very least, the story was expanded into a novel and comics from Nintendo Power that continue where the game left off. But at this point, I am not interested in anything else this side story has to offer. It could be good, I don't know, but this game, not really. If you grew up playing this game and loving it, I guess let me know if the later levels get better. I don't know, because otherwise I feel like your enjoyment will strain quickly just as mine did. Third slash fifth game for this video is Dark Forces. Initially released in 1995 for PCs and a year later in 1996 for PlayStation. But as you can see, I'm playing the recent remaster of this game, mainly because it's the most accessible version. It's pretty robust too. You can swap between new and old graphics, cutscenes, and controls, plenty of accessibility options to tinker with, and so much more. Probably one of the most fire remasters in recent memory. Anyways, let's begin with the story. In this game, you control Kyle Katarn, an ex-Imperial turned mercenary who helps the rebellion from time to time. As a matter of fact, in this old continuity, he's the one who stole the Death Star plans and passed them off to Leia. Now honestly, I think I prefer Rogue One's depiction over this, but we all know the best depiction. Perry the Platypus. Anywho, the Death Star is blown up, and the Empire practically leads a manhunt for anyone who's slightly associated with the rebellion. However, they're not only employing human soldiers for this job. Instead, they've also unleashed these new droid soldiers known as the Dark Troopers. Anyone who's seen The Mandalorian should recognize these guys, but this iteration of the Dark Trooper are not one-to-one with the Disney version. For one, they like dubstep playing wherever they go, which to me makes them automatically superior. To summarize a bit, we're essentially venturing to different planets with our good friend Jan Ors to uncover secrets surrounding this mysterious Dark Trooper project. But moving on to the gameplay side of things, it's very similar to other FPS shooters from the time like Doom and Wolfenstein. The remaster, however, does allow you to aim in all directions. The thermal detonators plus any and all explosive weapons can be pretty handy. Ammo is something you hardly need to worry about since the game practically spoils you with it, the blasters at least. You'll definitely find yourself running out of nearly everything else. I think my main issue with this game though are the levels. The overall gameplay within said levels is actually quite solid. It can just be a chore figuring out where you go half the time. Sometimes I stumble across secret areas that might have some good loot, but most of the time I just want to wrap the level up. It's not exclusive to this game though, it happens to me in Doom too. Not to mention, some of the environments can be pretty bland. Level 4 on the outside is just these white polygon shapes. And when most of the level looks exactly the same throughout, that just adds to the confusion on where exactly I'm going. The game does have a map, but it just doesn't help 100% of the time because it isn't like modern gaming maps. You know, like for example, Jedi Fallen Order has a 3D map, and like so does Metroid Prime, and this game just has a 2D map. And by the way, speaking of Doom, that game has something that this one doesn't in any capacity. Kickin' music. Yeah, it reuses some classic tracks from the films, but it doesn't really have anything that just gets you going like Doom has. Essentially, Dark Forces doesn't have its own Hell's Gate type track. But back to the levels, I don't think many of them are duds. Level 4 has you literally going through shit since it takes place in a sewage system. And I just find that kind of funny, especially when Dianogas are attacking you in the shit. Level 6 is an Imperial detention center where it wants us to be sneaky, but I wasn't really about that. Most of the level was good until I had to find a way into Cell Block N, and once I finally figured it out, I fell and died, and since all my lives were gone, I had to start over from the beginning. Super cool. Level 8 has us fighting a more finalized Dark Trooper. Level 9 has us venturing into the bounty hunter infested planet Nar Shaddaa, which is cool since I remember it from Force Unleashed, even if both iterations don't look that similar. Afterwards, we actually get captured by Jabba with one of the more annoying levels. Landmines are placed around pretty much every corner, and since the blast radius is so big, you'll probably be getting some unexpected deaths with them. On the plus side, you get to punch a Kell dragon to death, so that's pretty awesome. But skipping to the home stretch of the game, we sneak into the ISO, which is located on Coruscant, even if this place never appears on Coruscant in any other media, even from the old continuity. But after making it through waves of enemies, including another Dark Trooper that took me out, and solving this puzzle that I literally had to take a picture of in order to understand it, we head back to the landing bay where we meet our old friend from Shadows. Thankfully, I was able to beat him this time. In level 12, we have to sneak onto a smuggler ship, but the actual level kinda sucks. Mainly due to the circular platform that we have to rotate, and it takes forever to do so. But we use this ship to board the Executor Star Destroyer, which we then board whatever this thing is to get to the final level, the Arc Hammer. You'll have to fight tooth and nail through this place, because with the Dark Troopers swarming you, it'll really kick you in the shins. And unfortunately for me, I did get kicked in the shins, and since losing all your lives restarts the whole level, I kinda just lost interest in playing again. And that's the hook, I suppose. You'll never know what Kyle's victory looks like. until you watch someone else's playthrough. But that's Dark Forces. Overall, it's a solid game, and this remaster made it even better. While there are some frustrating aspects to it and some levels that just aren't fun, I'd say the good outweighs the bad. The weapon variety probably was the best to me though, since there are so many different ways to wipe out the enemies. Dark Forces doesn't end there though, as there are 3 other games that continue Kyle's story. Those games, like Jedi Outcast for instance, definitely help Kyle gain a fan favorite status, as more people probably remember him from the sequels. Let me know if you want to see me cover those ones though, because now I'm more curious to see where everything leads to. Right after I finish this YouTube video! Next game on our list is Star Wars Bounty Hunter, released in 2002 to coincide with the home media release of Attack of the Clones. Yeah, so Boba Fett has been kind of a douche in these last 2 games, but now we're going to play the game where he plays his superior dad. Yeah, I said it, and what I'll be discussing proves why he's better. You know, 1313 could have proved me wrong, but then that was cancelled. Then The Mandalorian almost proved me wrong, and then they made Book of Boba Fett. Also, I will add that I am playing the remaster of this game released on August 1st. And reminder that I bought 2 games for the combined price of $50 just for this one video with no return on investment. Anyways, let's dive in. So the general plot of this game is showing us why Jango Fett was chosen as the template for the clone army. The main reason why is pretty obvious, but it's also pretty genius. I'll reveal more as we go, but let's talk about gameplay first. Most of the game will be spent shooting, punching, and blowing up enemies, which can come off monotonous and repetitive to some, but I think it's alright. The only time it came off that way to me was during the prison arc in Chapter 5, and I'll definitely be elaborating on why soon. Now, last thing to go over about general gameplay mechanics is the jetpack. You don't actually start with it immediately, but you get it not too long after playing. I believe the controls for the jetpack were not that good according to players of the original, so it seems like they fixed it for the remaster. Because it's actually pretty fun to fly around while shooting the enemies below. You do some platforming with it too, which can get pretty ambitious and also really crazy. During the Coruscant industrial level, you had to go through this section with your jetpack, and it's just wild. I hadn't even realized you were supposed to go all the way down until after a few deaths. But again, getting all the way down there took a lot of meticulous jetpack boosts just to not die from the fall damage. Later on, you even do some zigzag flying. The jetpack also has a cooldown, which can be extended with a power-up. And I understand why it was added, but it would have been neat if you could at least have a permanent upgrade for the jetpack. Now, of course, with a title like Bounty Hunter, you may ask if you actually hunt any bounties. Which you do, but it's pretty much entirely optional. Each level has some bounties where the amount can vary from 5, 10, or 15. First, you have to mark them and choose whether they live or die. Capturing them alive typically rewards you more credits, so I just did that every time. Now, what do you use the credits for? Weapon upgrades, skill tree, bribes, taxes. Nope, it's all for bonus content. Bonus content is pretty cool though, since they included bloopers, a Boba Fett skin, playing cards, and a full comic book from the Open Season series. But if this game has bloopers, that implies this is all fake. Meaning, did any of this game actually happen? I think this game unknowingly opens some new kind of meta that I can see Alex Bale talking about. Anyways, I think my crucial negatives I can point out are the rolling move, which feels pretty sluggish, the glitches, which can range from hilarious to what the f*** is reality anymore, the hit detection on these turret enemies where they can be practically invincible in straight up tank rocket attacks, which, speaking of the rockets, I have a love-hate relationship with. When they work, they are really satisfying to actually use. And they completely fail, especially when they're a direct hit, I want to rip my hair out. That's really it though, really not too much to dislike here, at least I'd say. Getting back to the levels though, let's discuss the insanity of the prison levels. They are bullet and enemy hell. It's a prison, so naturally it's flooded with guards. They can be very overwhelming when a swarm of them just barge in. On top of that, the prisoners essentially team up with them to kill you later on. These sets of levels were definitely some of the ones I died on the most. as I'm sure many people would claim in their playthroughs. Fortunately, some neat plot relevance happens during this. Django meets up with Zam Wesell for the first time, and we steal a prisoner transfer ship, which will eventually become the Slave One we all know and love. Now, continuing the story, we next head to a planet that's swarming with these guys from the Geonosis arena and Dugs, the same species as Sebulba. We get our hands on a sniper rifle too, which I enjoy using just as much as in other shooters. This one doesn't have a zoom in. I don't know if I just didn't find the right button, but it makes it actually difficult to snipe people with accuracy. The next level kind of sucks. The glorified escort mission where Zam is the most useless character ever. He sometimes just doesn't move until you do something specific, and other times she'll just shoot at literal nothing. The final mission during this chapter takes us inside a death stick factory. Yeah, remember this iconic dealer from episode 2?
Wanna buy some death sticks?
You don't want to sell me death sticks.
Well, this game expands on what exactly they are. Drugs. They're drugs. Which, if I'm being honest, a level taking place inside a drug factory is pretty based. What isn't based are the Bandagora this cult found within the factory. For real, these guys around this corner kind of scare the shit out of me. Doesn't help that they're pretty fast and they walk like they're a damn orangutan. They could be someone's paralysis demon after playing this. Fuck, they might even be mine now. Anyways, our final confrontation in this level is Montrose, an old rival of Django's dating all the way back to the Mandalorian Civil War. We bombard him with rockets, which he somehow survives, but who am I kidding? I just went over how the normal enemies tank them too. But we learn some new info afterwards, which takes us to Tatooine to speak with the Hutts. Before that, we make it through this insane-ass level where the area is swarming with these guys from Longo's gang. Not to mention, your jetpack is taken away? Why? Who knows, maybe because it would have made this too easy? Again, I don't really know. But after all the madness, Jabba wants us to go assassinate Gardula, who actually made one brief appearance in episode 1. The trilogy of levels set on Tatooine have got to be the most difficult so far. They might make the prison levels look like child's play. Keyword might. There are so many enemies with rocket launchers, heavy guns, and
Sniper monkey.
each of these eat away at your health, and the snipers in particular can go bricks. They give you no time to react, they seemingly have aimbot, and in only a couple of shots, you're toast. After the misery, we get to Gardula and literally feed her to her pet Crate Dragon. We blow that bastard up, we leave Zam in her jail cell since she kinda threw us into the mess with the Crate Dragon in the first place, and we head to Colma, where the final act will take place. Before that though, we lose our good friend Roz, who gave us a lot of useful info up until this point. Montrose was responsible for this, so he's just one more prick we'll be checking off the list. The atmosphere of these final levels is pretty eerie, almost like a gothic feel. The gameplay for the most part will just be torching these guys ablaze like they're the goddamn thing from another world. We have one last encounter with Montrose, which if you lose, you actually get an alternate ending. Montrose goes on to be the clone template, I suppose, which I'm not opposed to millions of Clancy Browns running around. But after he gets eaten by the Bandagora, we're on the right track to stopping the true villain behind everything, Pomari Vosa.
She is such a bad bitch.
Once we light the Bandagora up some more, like they're the next on the Roadhouse menu, we end up getting restrained by her. Before she can go forward with torture, Zam miraculously returns and saves our ass. Time to face Vosa. And if I'm being honest, she's actually a bit easier than Montrose. Both can get pretty repetitive though. Upon defeation, we get a Christopher Lee jump scare because Dooku is here to congratulate us on finding and killing Vosa, his former Padawan. Meaning the final test to prove whether or not we were the perfect clone template was to kill a Jedi. And if that wasn't enough, Dooku eventually passes her lightsabers onto his next apprentice, Asajj Ventress. And this was actually depicted in the 2D Clone Wars show. He gives us the offer of the clone template, we accept, and Django and Zam leave the moon to hopefully have a long and prosperous friendship. Well, 10 years is long, so I mean. Anyways, that's Star Wars Bounty Hunter. A very solid game that, while being janky and buggy at times, along with being very frustrating due to some difficulty spikes, I still had fun with. Django's arsenal is pretty robust and enjoyable to plow down enemies with. The platforming sections utilizing the jetpack were also pretty cool, and the overall story of the game is nice to follow. The remaster is also the definitive way to experience this. Glad I invested into this revenue-free video to tell you all this. It is a shame there isn't a true successor to this game, because the two main ones were cancelled. 1313 would have followed Boba, so I imagine it was going to be similar. And more recently, the developers behind the Jedi Fallen Order series were set to make a game based on the Mandalorian Din Djarin, before being scrapped due to layoffs. Like honestly, a new and modern take on Bounty Hunter would be pretty sick, and it's high time it happens considering this is a 20-year-old game. Let that sink in. And last up for this video, I thought I'd take a look at a few. Now, Lucasfilm wanted this to be a big deal, so there was tons of merchandise and, as we have here, games made to promote it. But, much like the reception to the film, most of these got panned. And all these years later, are they actually terrible? I guess there's only one way to find out. Starting with Republic Heroes, we start off as Anakin and Ahsoka. I gotta say, the graphics are actually pretty close to the show's visuals. Now, how does the game play? Honestly, there isn't a lot to say about this game. A lot of people say this game sucks, but if anything, it's just painfully average. Not to mention, pretty mindless. All you're doing is just slow as shit platforming with occasional combat as the Jedi and mediocre third-person shooter sections as the clones. The plot isn't anything wild either, it's just sort of a retelling of some Season 1 and 2 arcs, like the Rylith one, for example. Again, I don't know what to really say about any of these levels. They're overall just very mindless experiences. I guess one noteworthy thing about this game is that on the 360 release, you can actually buy cosmetics based on other Star Wars games, which I think is pretty cool because The Force Unleashed did something similar where you can play as characters from KOTOR and Republic Commando. I love the synergy in this era of Star Wars games because it felt like one big community between these developers where they included Easter eggs towards each other, and that's just really neat. And one last fact, this game was made by Krome Studios, who made the Wii and PS2 version of The Force Unleashed, and it's a shame that Republic Heroes isn't at the same standard at all. Overall, if I play this without having watched the Clone Wars, I would probably be an advocate for the Clone Wars is for kids argument. That's really the best audience this game can reach. It's kind of what Season 1 and 2 felt like in the first place, so I guess it did its job. But next up we have Lightsaber Duels, which is exclusively for the Wii. Now with this one, I actually have even less to say here. So this game is like a standalone release of those multiplayer fighting modes that were included in Revenge of the Sith tie-in and Force Unleashed, and it's honestly weaker than any of those. Force Unleashed, for example, gave you plenty of characters from the prequels, originals, and even expanded universe. On top of that, the arenas were much bigger, more diverse, and the combat was more fun as you used fucking lightning. In the Clone Wars game, you can do none of that. Most of it just devolves to waggling the remote since we're on the Wii after all, and they actually have combos that you can do, but again, motion controls. They do what they do. The computer is the only one who will effectively use them to kick your ass. Now ultimately, it's okay, but not a whole lot of substance to talk about any further. Next up is the appetizer to our final game, LEGO Star Wars: The Quest for R2-D2. Since you're all waiting for the big Clone Wars game I haven't talked about yet, I'm just going to quickly go over this Flash game that I actually played a bit as a kid. Now everyone has their favorite Adobe Flash games, and while I love the Papa games the most, Quest for R2-D2 was there for me too. I remember the first time I stumbled upon it was when I was playing Pop Tropica of all things. It was an ad in the game, and while I likely would not click on stuff like that now, I was too intrigued back then. I remember being really impressed by it though because it was a fully 3D game that was playable in your browser. Of course, since Flash is discontinued and the website doesn't exist anymore, I'll resort to playing it on Flashpoint, which is also how I'm still able to play the Papa games on PC. Now firstly, we have the choice of playing as Anakin or Asajj Ventress. They have nearly the exact same levels, but both start on either side of the stage and you fight different enemies. I kinda feel bad for killing the clones as Ventress, but she's unknowingly doing the Jedi a favor. Anyways, this game overall is pretty standard and not too special. The graphics are still what impressed me the most, because again, this was a fully 3D game that was playable in a browser. Also, having an upgrade system for your moves and everything is pretty slick too. Again, all this for an Adobe Flash game, and they kinda went all out here. Not much in the gameplay department though, cause yeah, nothing too special here. But to cap off this Clone Wars segment and retrospective as a whole, let's talk about LEGO Star Wars 3, being one of the last LEGO Star Wars games for years until 2016. It's definitely the black sheep of all the entries, as it's the only flagship LEGO Star Wars game to not be based on the Skywalker saga. Since this was meant to promote the Clone Wars show like the last two games, it adapts multiple episodes from seasons 1 and 2. As we already know, not the brightest seasons that came from that show, but a good chunk of these levels are still pretty good. The hidden enemy, where we fight Ventress on this falling spider droid, or however the hell you pronounce this. The Geonosian Queen with her horde of zombies. I have a lot of nostalgia for the dual droids since it was the first level I played after the prologue when I first got the game. Speaking of the prologue, it has been completely revamped from the complete saga. Now there are a shit ton of droids all on the same screen as a way of showing off how the game engine has improved, and you get to actually battle the creatures from the movie this time. And honestly, it's crazy how a game from 2011 did a level much better than a game from 2022. Anyways, Blue Shadow Virus has a lot of characters added to your party throughout the level, which makes it pretty fun to play. And one last one to note before addressing some crucial gameplay additions is Rookies, where just like in the episode, many of our favorite clones work together to defend an outpost, including Rex, Cody, Echo, Heavy, and... You know, in hindsight, good thing this game stops at Season 2, because we did not need certain moments from this show adapted in LEGO. They'd scar even more kids. Right, now on to the most notable additions added to this game. Firstly, you can swap between two different character POVs. Like in this situation, both characters are divided between two sides of the ship where one has to fight Grievous, but the other one has to get to the control bridge. I think it's a great way to give co-op players different goals instead of one player just blindly following the other the entire level. Even in single player, it's cool having characters with different objectives throughout. Next we have these space battle missions, which you start in a starship and you can land them at these red spots. Typically you land to flip some kind of switch, which will allow you to progress to the next red spot and rinse and repeat. Yeah, they aren't that great to be honest, but it's at least cool they're here for a little bit of variety. And the last type of level is the ground assaults. These consist of you trying to capture the enemy turf by destroying everything in their circle. Sometimes you'll have to use lasers to melt gold objects, or vehicles with heavier blaster power to destroy silver objects. In small doses, I find these kind of fun, but the problem is the game just beats you over the head with them. Yeah, so not only does Dooku's campaign consist mainly of these missions, but the other two campaigns at least have one of these. The epilogue, which is about the Zilla Beast, is also one of these levels. Again, playing very little of this mode isn't that bad, but when so much of the game is banking on it, I get fatigued by it very easily. Especially when we get into the Republic and Separatist assault mode. This consists of you battling either side to control the planet you're on, and by controlling every planet on either side, you are rewarded Palpatine for the Republic and Tarkin for the Separatists. That's just it though, once you control every planet on one side, you have to repeat it again just to unlock the other character. Definitely one of my least favorite things I've ever done for 100% completion in a LEGO game. The 100% ward is dog shit too. It's just a new ship, whoop-de-f***ing-do. Alright, let me stop hating and start looking at something else that I actually find cool in this game. The hub world. You get to explore the Venator with some beautiful music playing while you do. Just by wandering around, you'll run into characters that you can actually purchase, which is neat. Speaking of characters, collecting all 10 mini-kits in a level will typically reward you with an original trilogy character, but check this shit out. Starkiller is an unlockable character in this game. This is where LEGO Star Wars peaked in terms of character rosters, just for him alone. Now you can also travel to the Invisible Hand and hang out in the Villains Corner. Here you can play some bounty hunter missions and 2 levels from the Villains POV. Really gives me LEGO Batman 1 vibes, but that game did the villain levels better. Yeah, Castle of Doom and Hostage Crisis aren't that good, but at least it's only 2. So, that's LEGO Star Wars 3 and Clone Wars games in general. Most of these had no substance or were that good, but LEGO Star Wars 3 is an overall solid game, even if the ground battles overstayed their welcome a bit. Most of the normal levels were fun, and Starkiller being in the roster just gives it more bonus points. I'd say it's actually better than the game that preceded it, but I don't think that's a very high bar to beat. And one last cool fact about this game is that the voice cast of the Clone Wars actually provided the grunts and sounds for their characters. Pretty neat, since this was the first time that's happened in a LEGO game. Most of them even came back for the Skywalker Saga. Huge W for them. And there you have it. The more Star Wars games that I felt the need to blabber on about. Now, unlike last episode, this set of games have been a lot more mixed, and that was kind of by choice. Because I kind of wanted to highlight how old Star Wars games were not all pitch perfect like I made them out to be in the first video. There are some genuinely bad and mediocre games, but I feel like they were few and far between to what we get today. All we get today is barely anything, and when we do get games, they range from good to bad. Like, mediocrity is just gone, it's only good and bad. But you know what? I'll tell you all about that next time, because in part 3, I'll be discussing Star Wars games of the modern era. Until then, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all later. Take care.